Greetings and peace, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I would like to begin this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. Today I have the honor, privilege, and pleasure of being joined by my brother Saleem Siddiqui of the Hot Conflict series. For those that remember YouTube from back in the day, Brother Saleem has educated so many people on esoterics, the sciences, spirituality, Islam, Sufism, way before anybody ever came on the scene. So he's one of the original teachers. And also, he has influenced me much in my life as well with my path that I've chosen to walk. And I will give you a brief introduction on Brother Saleem. He's a political commentator, he's a consultant, public speaker, he's a trained mediation and conflict resolution specialist, and he conducts sermons and training for various religious and nonprofit organizations. He's an expert on many fields, a gentleman and a scholar. And so without further ado, welcome my brother. And the topic that we were going to cover on this presentation is the Islamic influence on what we know as modern day Freemasonry.
First of all, thank you for having me. I feel so honored and embarrassed by that glowing introduction. Of course, most people don't know who I am. They never heard from me. They don't realize that people were out there. But for people who are starting and listening for the first time, I'm a Muslim. I was born Muslim. I was raised Muslim. But what does that really mean? It means we believe in the truth of one creator, one supreme architect and grand planner of all that is. And that in Arabic, we use the term Allah. And we also believe that there are angels and they are made of light. They have no free will. They obey the commandments of their Lord and they do not disobey. And then there are also other beings that we in Arabic call the jinn of many various types, and they have free will and they can choose to be good or bad. And this is an area that there is some contention between us and some of the other groups in differences. Other than that, we believe in the same things of faith, that there were prophets and messengers coming with divine holy books, and that eventually there is a point where there will be a final hour or a judgment day. And after that, there is Jannah wa Nar, or what we call in English heaven and hell, the afterlife that is everlasting. And all of this is the plan of Allah. We usually start there and introduce these things because when we're talking about concepts like Freemasonry, the occult, esoteric, everybody gets afraid, right? I mean, it's the first thing that happens is people get afraid. And so we always want to start, especially for those who are hearing this as Muslims and hearing people talk about these subjects, which most Muslims do not address and do not talk about. We start with the basic fundamentals, or what we call the arkan of Islam, the pillars of faith. And these pillars of faith are what all Muslims believe. And we claim by Allah that these are the same pillars of faith that all messengers of light believe. They all came preaching this same concept. So then we go into what is our real subject today, the concept of Masons and Freemasonry. So you and me and most people growing up here in the West, the first time I heard about any of these things, it's a scary story or some kind of idea that there's this secret esoteric group out there controlling the world, and you just hear rumors and innuendo, and your normal reaction is to be afraid. That is always the first reaction, right?
Yes,
right? People are scared of what they don't know. So I grew up, most people like in the West,
so
being afraid. Go ahead.
No, please continue. I'm just so fascinated by just the way your spirit and the love that you are delivering this message. I think in a time, this is so important, my brother. Please continue.
So, I mean, we all grew up hearing these conspiracy theories. And I grew up, I was probably kind of a rebel, right? I had great highs and great lows. And only after getting older and more gray do you realize that all the highs and lows are on purpose and everything about your life is a plan. But I had times where I was extreme on certain things. I mean, from the time I was 10 or 11, I traveled from Canada to England to go study in Dar al-Uloom and learn Quran. And that was, in those days, there were no Hifz school or Quran madrasas in North America at that point. So yeah, I'm old, right? I was born in the 70s. But I remember when I was in my late teens, early 20s, after I had come back, I went after high school to go to Egypt and spent time at Al-Azhar. And then I was going to go or had come back from Bosnia. This is one of the things that makes me slightly different than a lot of the people that talk about Islam is I was a soldier before I studied Islam. Really. I mean, I had already been Muslim and raised Muslim, and my parents are Muslim, but I never had studied Islam formally. But I had gone to be a soldier first. And whether it was the qadr of Allah or not, putting your life on the line as a soldier for any cause, putting your life on the line for others is a major initiation, a major activation, a major level of personal awareness. And doing that in an age where, you know, it was almost the last generation of the term jihad. Well, here we go. We're going to put a word on your podcast that's going to get us canceled, inshallah. They don't block us out. But I grew up in the age where we used to get halakas and people visiting from Afghanistan. And Afghanistan, they had mujahideen, and the Afghanis were in opposition to the communist Reds. And so, strangely, the Afghan mujahideen and the Americans were allies. And so the mujahideen were considered the Muslim freedom fighters working with democracy to fight against Russia. And the concept of jihad and mujahideen was a positive depiction. And this went on all the way throughout the 80s, even all the way up until the early 90s when the Bosnian conflict happened. And I was probably in my early 20s, and I decided to go to Bosnia and was captured as a prisoner of war. I don't know if I ever talked to you about this before. Got held there and went through time and spent time with the Mujahideen. And even in those days in the Western press, the Mujahideen were still being shown as freedom fighters, even on Time magazine and that type of stuff. But I remember hearing stories, and I remember the first person who told me, I mean, you know, in the olden days, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have technology, so everything was word of mouth. So the first person who told me a story that I trusted was my own chacha, my own uncle, my dad's younger brother. And he says to me, he and my father were both trying to discourage me from getting involved in anything to do with jihad or the global conflict. And they were trying to tell me there's a lot more going on and a lot of things in the concepts of conspiracy and manipulation and global politics that you're not aware of, and you're just offering yourself as a soldier, a pawn in the war, just to get yourself killed. And I kind of understood what they meant, but I also knew that jihad, defending the Muslims, is always true. And there is some truth in that. The concept of jihad as a form of defense is always a right of every Muslim, whether it is your nation, your town, your village, or even your personal home. If someone tries to invade your personal home and you die defending your own house, you are considered a shaheed, a person who dies in the path. So there's a spiritual concept there of defense that Muslims tend to forget. But my chacha was telling me this weird story. You know how the olden days people, they always tell you these weird conspiracy stories and you're not sure what to make of them. And he says, I heard from a guy who heard from a guy who heard from a guy. You're never sure how many people there was in the chain, but somebody who told me that I believed that it was after World War II, that someone told him, if you want to know the truth of the mysteries, I will take you to a place and you will see. And then this guy says, wait for me by such and such a place, and a car will come and pick you up, and a car comes and picks him up, and it's like a black limo, and he takes him out into the village somewhere, into the middle of nowhere, and there they find a mansion, and he says, when you go there, give this secret word to enter the door, and you will go inside. And he goes inside, and inside there he sees kids reading Quran and kids studying hadith and kids reading books of fiqh and tafsir, and finds out they're all wearing like imamas and they look like they could be Sufis or they could be in some kind of tariqah. And he goes and he looks through all the building and sees all the rooms of all these halaqat, and then leaves the building and goes back into the car. And the man tells him, these are all master masons, training the next generation of master masons to infiltrate and propagate and take control of the Muslim world. supposedly this happened in Turkey, according to the ancient tale that I heard from my uncle. So these are the kinds of things I grew up hearing and wondering, could any of this be true? Is it true that secretly all the mujahideen are being run by three-letter organizations or secret societies? And is this happening? Has it been happening forever? Is there connections between the Muslims and the secret societies? And how can any of this stuff be true? And so these ideas were there in the back of my mind, but like all people who grew up not knowing about this stuff, it was more about fear and paranoia, right? A concept of who controls, who's secretly running the world, and what are these organizations that we don't know about? What was it like for you when you first heard about this stuff?
Yes, definitely, brother. That is amazing and fascinating. When I first heard about this stuff, it was when you had the square and compass video that you did on hot conflict. I believe it was back in 2010, and I had come across it.
Okay.
And I'm the first person in my family to not only join a Sufi tariqa, but also to be a Muslim Freemason. And I was interested to see, like, okay, what is going on with all of these things? Because I always thought outside of the box. What is going on with this world? Why do things work the way that they do? So I watched your videos, and you inspired me on the path that I'm walking today, and that led me to Sufism. I became part of Tariqa. I got the aspects of inner Islam, the Zahir and the Batin of what it's really about. Then I went to Freemasonry, and I realized a lot of these teachings reminded me of Islam. And I'm like, you know what? I have to ask Brother Saleem Siddiqui, because he is like my mentor from back in the day. And I have to ask him how basically within Islam, like modern Freemasonry, how is it influenced by the Islamic and Sufi teachings that the Western is not giving credit to?
It's so surprising, right? It's so unbelievable, and it doesn't come as you expect. And I did this the old school fashion. It wasn't until many years later, that I had been back living in Houston and going to school and going to real life, that one day I got a bunch of brothers together and said, let's go sit with the Sheikh, one of the great Sheikhs who studied in Al-Azhar, but who was highly involved in Ikhwan al-Muslimin and one of the leaders of Ikhwan in North America. And I said to a handful of brothers, we never really try to do the old fashioned way of go sit with a sheikh and have the discipline to go do the work, right? Like, you want to take over the world, you want to be warriors, you want to be spiritual fighters, but do you have the discipline to sit in a halaqah for a half an hour and study some hadith? And most young guys don't. I mean, we're so gung-ho, we want things to change tomorrow. We lack patience, and this is something you learn as life goes on. But he gave us a halaqah, and of course, إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Actions are based on intentions. First hadith out of the book. He gives us halakha for 45 minutes. And, the other couple of brothers with me, they were annoyed. I mean, like, we thought maybe we're going to go sit with the sheikh, a private little halakha, 2 or 3, 4 people that are hardcore people that the sheikh knows are serious, who have traveled and gone in jihad, and we're all hardcore brothers. And he teaches us innamal a'malu binniyat. I mean, this is what you learned the first day of Sunday school. Why are you wasting our time? We've all heard of intention before, right? But as you get more understanding, you realize, yes, we've heard the words intention, but we have no idea what they really meant. We have the concept of intention before salah or ibadah, but we use it as a ritual instead of getting into a spiritual zone of pure intent from the heart that only someone who trains themselves internally gets to, that high level of what we call niyyah, the point of manifesting reality into being, the kun fayakun, the be and it is, so mote it be, of any brethren of the lodge, is all about the manifestation of intent. But yeah, what did we know, right? So at the end of the halakha, he realizes we're kind of disgruntled. So he goes into the other room and comes out with this little folder thing, and he starts pulling out this stuff, and it's it's a apron of a master mason and a certificate of a master mason, and he's showing us this stuff, and he's trying to explain to us that we don't realize what's going on in the political situation. He's telling us also the same thing my uncle was telling me a long time ago, that those who are controlling the warrior factions on the game board or the risk board of the actual world are just moving players like chess pieces, and all those who you think are mujahideen or warrior Muslim groups are just being run by three-letter agencies and secret societies. He's trying to explain this to us in concept, but we're just shocked looking at this stuff that we've never seen before. Oh my God, this is a real Masonic apron. What is this? It's all leathery, and it's got all these tassels, and it's got all this symbolism on it. And while I'm looking at this, the brother next to me is like nudging me on the side, and I'm not paying attention because I'm so shocked at this is like real Masonic secret stuff. I've never seen this stuff in my life. So I'm like kind of shocked, and he's holding the certificate, and he's pointing at the name and trying to get me to notice the name of who the master mason is. I never even thought to look at who's the actual name of the master mason. Now I'm about to find out some secret information of an actual name of a master mason, and I look at the name and I recognize the name, and it's one of the mujahideen who went to Bosnia with me from Houston out of only a handful of people, and he was the emir of our group. Now, I was the Naib Emir of our group, and I'm finding out that the actual Emir of the Mujahideen group that I went from Houston to Bosnia, less than 10 people, he was a master mason. I'm finding out not the conspiracy is true, I'm finding out that conspiracy happened to me in my life. And the Emir of my Mujahideen group was a master mason. And it blows my mind. Everything that the old generation told me is true. Everything that they told me is true. How could that be? And it starts a handful of months of me thinking, who are these guys? They were manipulating me and I didn't know it, but I didn't have anybody manipulate me. Nobody did anything to me. So how could this be? How could they secretly be there? And again, the level of paranoia and fear and confusion. By this time, I'm living in Houston. I'm finishing my degrees. I'm getting ready to go to law school. My father had gotten sick and all kinds of stuff had started to happen. And you notice the patterns. You start noticing lodges everywhere. You start seeing the symbol of the lodge everywhere. You start noticing the square and compass or the pyramid, and you get into that conspiracy mindset. But being a crazy person that I am, I do what people never do, is just walk up into a lodge, knock on the door, and walk in and say, hi, who are you guys? What do you do? Right? I do that kind of crazy thing. And maybe it's a last generation thing. This is a generation from before the internet where you had to go somewhere to learn something, right? You didn't find information online. And so I literally walked into a Masonic lodge and asked them what they do. And they said, oh, we have an open meeting next week on this day. Come back. So I came back, and then they said, okay, we have another meeting on this day. And I came back and kept going until I learned the basics and then did the requirements, went through the, entered apprentice degree, and then became a fellow on the journey of my craft, all the way to becoming a master mason, learning the words, going through the rituals, going through understanding the symbolism, memorizing the verses and knowledge just like we would any sacred text, and strangely finding what you would have found and what most people would find, that just like in any masjid or church or temple or lodge, 99.9% of the people there are just good people trying to find truth and live a spiritual life. And the idea of this is a room of people where good men gather together to try and increase themselves in knowledge and purity and light and make other good men better. I thought, okay, that's very strange because that's not what I expected. The weirdest thing that anybody who was a Muslim finds about going into a lodge is the requirement of belief in an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing, all-understanding creator, a true creator of all that is, an architect and a planner and an organizer, a qadir of all that is. The idea that to be a master mason, you have to believe in Tawheed is the most shocking thing that a Muslim finds out when they find out about it. For me, that was the mind blower. And it was the first time I realized, wait a second, right? We're the people of Tawheed, right? This is our thing. Everybody else claims to have Tawheed, but we're actually Muslims. We know what Allah means and what it means to have one Allah. So if they're actually secretly teaching people Tawheed, where did they secretly get this from? They had to have got it from somewhere, right? And that began my journey into looking back and trying to understand the deep interplay and connections throughout history over multiple times and multiple interactions where Muslims and lodge members interacted and knowledge was exchanged or passed. And we have some of these references in pop culture and we have some of these stories in history, but it's the twilight zone, right? It's the nature of the dunya. It's the yin yang. It's the checkerboard of reality, that everything you think is white is black and everything you think is black is white. It's the opposite of what you assume. So all the paranoias and fears that you have one way, and this is the general level that most Muslims go. If they do go down the rabbit hole of trying to understand this, they do so from the level of fear and paranoia. And so they learn the level of the warnings and the misguidances, but they don't seek the light. And Salman, we must always seek the light. The light is the only thing that's important. And if you assume that an area is all dark and there is no light, then you won't find light. But if you believe as a fundamental light must exist everywhere in everything, then you look for it. And yes, it's true. Sometimes it's harder to find the light in a bunch of darkness, but the light must be there. And so starting to look with a pure intention at what was going on in most lodges from a perspective of light and thinking, just like we would look at Islam, if someone looked at modern day Islam, we would say, you're not really understanding. You have to look back at the earlier generations. Just like the American constitutionalists would say, okay, we don't want to understand the Constitution according to the liberal agenda of today. We want to understand it based on the righteousness of the founding fathers or the earlier generations. We all have that kind of concept of seeing things in a pure way, the original intent, and thinking that the earlier generations had a pure intention and understanding of the message. And so that gets mixed in with Masonry, with Islam, with even the American Constitution, and some of the historical significances of what we would call the myth and the legend around America itself, right? So where do you want to go back? Do you want to go back to American history? Do you want to go back to European history? Do you want to go back to the Crusades, ancient Egypt before the flood? The concepts of masonry can start anywhere, right?
Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah. It's so beautiful that you touched on these subjects, because even in Islam, we are taught that Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Allah is the light that is everywhere. The Freemason is searching for the light. The Muslim is searching for the light. And we are taught that Allah is the guardian of those who believe, and He brings you from darkness to light, one of the verses of the Holy Quran. So the most interesting concept that I found with Freemasonry is like when you had the Knights Templar in the Middle East, like how we see even in the John Wick movies, like the guy who was running everything was an elder in the desert of the Islamic world. So the aspect of what we see in Assassin's Creed and the Knights Templar and the Hashashin and all of that, what did the Knights Templar really encounter in the Crusades, which they took back to Europe, which goes to the foundations of what we all see today? I would love your take on that.
The truth about it is it's so complex, right? It's so complex that it's hard for people to fathom, and every time they deal with it, it it's skewed by their perspective. So we would say, to understand the general concept, we would start with the idea of sacred geometry, right? Now, for a Mason and for an architect or an engineer, that would be the basic concepts and principles of math and geometry and the way general architecture and mathematical structure fit naturally. That concept gets extended to the concept of architecture and building, and also the concept of rotation of the earth and the sun and the moon. Now, as these things interplay and interconnect, the Masons are always those who use their knowledge of nature and science and what we would call sacred geometry to overcome their foes by understanding the signs of reality around them. And this gets played out in a lot of the biblical lore and stories of the Knights Templar and how they interacted with other communities, and the concepts that you said about the Hashashin, a deeper understanding of what we would call as brothers sacred geometry. In Islam, we would call that an understanding of qadr, the way Allah has made everything. And in the Quran, Allah talks about it as, refer to the orbit of the sun and the moon and the stars, and understanding the seasons and the night and the day, and all these things have a concept. Now, in the modern world, they're just starting to understand these concepts and refer to them as sacred geometry and understanding spirituality in geographics and ley lines and where certain sacred sites were placed and how that related in Europe, and how intention and focus and direction are related to spirituality. Now, as Muslims, we would say we are all practicing 5 times a day a form of sacred geometry. We are all directing our intent towards the sacred Kaaba, right? And this is something done by Muslims all over the world. And the ruling of the elder generations that you had to be on certain sacred ley lines for activation has been abrogated by the fact that he is the last messenger, and that all of the earth is now holy and sacred, and a master or a Muslim can perform the ritual anywhere and any place, barring few exceptions that are unclean places, but anywhere on the earth, directing their intent to the sacred square in sacred geometry. And there at the sacred square, brothers of light are circling the sacred square 24 hours a day, spinning the sacred light in counterclockwise fashion around the sacred house or the most sacred lodge, established by the most sacred master, who placed the most sacred cornerstone within it, as all brethren of the lodge should recognize. Now, that as a Masonic concept is strange, that people don't understand that the lodge has been trained to understand the concepts of sacred geometry, both in the original placement of the pyramid as the center of the world geographically, and the Kaaba as part of the golden ratio, the next evolution of mathematics. And if you understand that the early Muslims would have understood this geometrics, and they would have understood it geographically, then one of the first things that the Knights Templar, the lodges from the West, would have understood by meeting the lodges from the East is the circumference and square of the earth, right? This is the beginning. Now, imagine you're in the old days, Brother Salman, and is it Dhuhr time or is it Asr time? They're picking up the sand, they're dropping it on the ground, they're looking at the shadow, they're measuring the rotation of shadow and sun, and they're doing that every day. Now, we know, not to rewrite history, that the age of understanding comes when Europeans first gain access to Latin and some Arabic, and they start to learn medicine, they start to learn mathematics, they start to learn astronomy and the zodiacs, and they take all of this knowledge from the Muslims and they become enlightened, right? They become enlightened after they steal our content, right? Like they come over, they steal our content, they learn from our knowledge. And it's true, the enlightenment occurs because this is new information that didn't happen. But the most esoteric and the most secret of them kept certain knowledge to themselves. And so that is one of the things that they would have learned from the Brotherhood, is the concept that the world is bigger than they think, and the idea of the new world. And this plays into the legends of how did early Masons go all the way to Europe after King Solomon's temple? Did they travel even further to North America? Why is Columbus's navigator a Moroccan Moor? It's because those in the Moroccan lodges in the West understood geography and navigation and basic even circumference of that time, and they would have understood the size of the earth, and they would have understood that there was a new land. And at that time, we also know that there's records of ancient maps from the Ottoman Empire, the Piri Reis maps. So when brethren of the West met with brethren of the East, this is some of the basic worldly information that they got. And this is how the beginning of the conquest of the New World happens. And the secret kind of plan amongst many of the European Masons that we will eventually abandon the crown and the royal families and the organization of the Vatican to found the New Jerusalem, or the new land of peace, or the new land of Islam, or the new land of Salam. And this eventually ends up becoming Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, right? Founded by the brethren. But to understand that, you got to go back to when? When the first Masons, who were not Masons, but again, what? Warriors, soldiers. Soldiers rise to a new level. Why? Because they have decided to put their life on the line. And putting your life on the line puts you in the matrix, puts you in the worldly realm at a higher level of seeing. And when you're in the path of God, even though you might be on the wrong side, you're still in that zone. And so you're looking for truth. Now, when the Knights Templar leave the temple, what happened and what were they told by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, or who was the one who told them, or what treasures did they found? Most of the time, the legend tries to make it about finding the Ark of the Covenant or finding the Holy Grail, the chalice, like we're looking for treasure. But any true brethren, any true knight would know more important than worldly treasures is always truth. Is always truth, or what we would call light, or what we would call the story, the tale. You would not need to write it down, my brother. It does not need to be written. It is told verbally when a brother trusts another brother. And we read strange things that even during the Crusades, they would fight during the day, but they would sit at night and debate and talk and drink and eat and even intermarry between the Muslims and the Christians. And we know many tales where Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is giving Richard the Lionheart medicine and he's trusting him to be his doctor. They're enemies on opposing sides of war, but you're accepting the enemy general as your doctor. Right? But they understood honor and trust and truth. So I believe the mystery, right? Other than, some of the spiritual concepts of, inner truth and knowledge and the true understanding is the knowledge that we try to always tell people, but they think is unimportant, is that the Knights Templar were told what we believe. The one true God is true, and angels are real, but they do not possess free will, and they are made of the light, and they cannot disobey. All other beings in our history who have acted on free will are by definition other forms of Bani Adam or Jinn, and that is all there is. So all the ideas of fallen angels in ancient text or other beings are not false, they're true. And all the secret mysteries that there have been interbreeding and hybridization, and all those things are possibly true. And that those things that we would call jinn are the ones that your royals And your church and the Vatican, they are in league with them and they are worshiping them falsely, just like the gods of old. And so when the Knights Templar learn this about the Vatican and the royals and the concept of secret bloodlines and all this stuff that is used as propaganda and conspiracy, they know as soldiers this is not true. That which the Muslims are saying is true, that there is only one God and Muhammad is his messenger. That is the secret knowledge of the Knights Templar and all Masonic orders. And after this point, the Knights Templar returned from the Holy Land and realized we must separate ourselves from the church. And they do that by copying the economics of the Muslims and creating the halakha system and the IOU system through their Templar lodges and their Templar sites. And it becomes such a problem for the Vatican that the knowledge of this starts to spread. And then what we have is what, the 1300s, where the Vatican declares what? The Knights Templar, the holy warriors, the mujahideen for Christ are now our true enemy. They have become worst of all things in league with the devil. That's what they were doing. They have become doing pagan rituals, that which the false churches were doing. And oh no, worse than all worse things, they have secretly become brothers with the Muslims, the Saracen heathens. That is the worst thing, right? Like that is why they gave up Jerusalem. That is why we lost. The Knights Templar are secretly Muslim and we must excommunicate them from the church. And this is the basis of the story of Friday the 13th, where the Templars get excommunicated by the official church and they go underground. And then for the rest of the story in Europe, it's a secret order that again goes up and down. And like all groups and organizations and communities, gets infiltrated at different times by light and dark forces. And this is the area where most people don't understand. Just as the Muslims went through ups and downs in our history, every group goes through ups and downs where dark forces take over and then start a new agenda and try and do things for evil and nefarious purposes. And so when you're introduced to something, you see only the bad about it. Just like most people, when they find you or me, it'll be by probably somebody doing a opposition video on us, and then they'll find us. But that's the way it goes, right? Even for the sacred messengers, it was like that, right? Many people were speaking up in opposition to them. That's always how it goes. And so the same thing happened with the Masonic order. And as a fundamental, people of the light must believe a certain thing. Something is only created for true and good purposes. People only come together to form a lodge or create a brotherhood or create an entity or an organization for a true purpose. The dark doesn't have that ability, right? The dark doesn't create. It is not in its nature to let's make something. I want to do something beneficial for others. It's not the way the dark works. So the true essence of almost everything is originally light that then gets corrupted. And so that's one of the areas where people might find it hard to understand. Okay, are we saying that these Masonic lodges were originally true and light-filled intended places? Yeah, surprisingly, that's the mind-blowing revelation as a Muslim. Oh, the original intent of all of these things were to remind people and prepare people for the knowledge of Islam. What? What? How could that be, Brother Salman?
My brother, this is absolutely fascinating and true. And myself, as a Master Mason, as a Royal Archmason, as a Sufi, as a 32nd degree of the Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite, even been through the Shriners. I see that there's always this one fundamental truth that's being taught to us by the light, and we are not comprehending this. And you have laid it out in such a vivid and beautiful manner, like an artist painting his picture on the canvas. And this message is supposed to be celebrated, my brother. and not condemned. And I thank you so much for the education that you are giving us right now. And it makes sense why I saw Brother Saleem Siddiqui, the son of Shamshad, in 2010 on YouTube, which led me to Sufism, Freemasonry, and now in 2023 we're here officially meeting, and you're still teaching me, and I'm so grateful, my brother. And it brings me to my next question: is why don't the Western esoteric scholars or Masonic scholars give any credit to Islam, but rather only to Greeks and Romans? And the evidence that you have laid out, it's there for those that have the eyes to see. Even in Rosicrucianism, we see the symbol of the rose, and how Christian Rosenkreuz was is initiated by the Sufis, and how Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, rahmatullah alayhi, was known as the Rose of Baghdad. So why aren't the Western esoteric schools and Masonic scholars not giving any credit to Al-Islam or the Sufis?
I don't know if it's because at a secret level they think this is too much for people to handle, or that it literally is a secret knowledge that the majority of them do not understand. It also goes into some of the deeper level jinn stuff, right? There's always the yin yang of fighting it. Like you said, at different times in the European part of Masonic history, they got that the concept of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, that is there in Islam. The concept of Az-Zahra, the rose, right? The prophet named Fatima Az-Zahra as the embodiment of the divine feminine, again with the same literal rose epitaph that we would call the namesake of the Rosicrucians, or Rosslyn Chapel. And this goes back to the idea of some of the secret Masonic lodges getting into the origins of the Scottish Rite, and there was a strong part there. Now, there are some who think that the Rosicrucians and their ties to the Jesuits creates the major rift in the Masonic lodge, and that maybe this is where the division happens between what we might call Masonry and Illuminati, right? And is there a division in who's controlling what, right? And so I'm not as familiar with some of the deeper partitions, and I don't think technically most of those levels are understood now in our day and age. These are divisions that were occurring 200-300 years ago. Now, we get to the point where the European lodges lose dominance because America gets created, right? The strangeness of America being created. And at its heart and essence, this is something that I hadn't understood and wasn't expecting to see. I remember thinking my father had always wanted me to go to law school, and I was always, the rebel Muslim. Why would I want to go study American law? I mean, what's the point of it? I know it's all corrupt. I know it's all illegitimate. And yes, it's true. Just like most things, when you go out there, they're corrupted by darkness. They've bent and they've compromised, and whether it's Muslims, Christians, Masons, the legal system, all things go through ebbs and flows. So I had no interest in it, but when I started studying it and studying the founding fathers and the concepts of independence, and realizing the connection to the lodge and Masons, and how these were all Masons who were trying to oppose the hierarchical control of Europe, both in economics and taxation, and to get away from the royal bloodline system, to get away from the organized church, not to separate themselves from spirituality, and find out more and more that many of the founding fathers were Master Masons, and that they had intended to make this a new country, and that their actual nia for founding the United States and establishing the 13 colonies was based on fundamental concepts that they had tried and taken from truths that they may have correctly or incorrectly understood from Eastern knowledge, or what they considered to be light, or what they considered to be Tawheed, right? Not that we would define it that way, but their intent was pure. And then you start to understand some of the concepts that the spiritual Republicans have, meaning that this America was done with the hand of God. It was part of God's plan. It was God's intention. That sounds crazy for a Muslim, but everything that exists is part of God's intention. If this is not the intention of Allah, it wouldn't exist. And so there is some truth in that. And not until I read the writings of the early founding fathers and writings from before they even established America in their opposition to the church and crown in Europe did I realize these guys sound like us. Right? Their intention and their niyyah for what they want to establish for mankind sounds like us. And that they're saying obvious things like we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with unalienable rights of them life, the liberty to do as they please and choose their own pursuit of their own happiness by their own path or tariqah or way, everybody with their own free will. These are advanced Islamic concepts. Who taught our founding fathers Islam? When did this happen? And then you start learning and you realize, oh my God, Thomas Jefferson had a Quran, and you start realizing, oh, the Muslim nations were the first ones to declare allyship with the independent Americans because they recognized we are in agreement in opposition to the Vatican and the churches of Europe and the royal family system and colonialism. And you start to realize all these connections that don't get taught in history, not American history or in world history of any of the ancient parts we're talking about. If you study any of those things, the Islamic Empire doesn't even exist. It barely gets mentioned. Maybe the idea of Bedouin lifestyle and some camel jockeying stuff gets mentioned, but nothing more advanced than that. But when you do the actual work, you realize we were the ones leading in the advanced knowledge. And this concept and secret of coming to America was given from our master masons to their master masons, down through generations and generations of planning, down through masons working with Isabella and Ferdinand, down through Muslim navigators charting the path, down to probably Muslims coming to America before the founding fathers and stuff that people don't talk about at all. And then you start to realize that the interplay is there, and that instead of being afraid of the Masonic lodges, we were supposed to interpret this as Muslims with light and see that all these brethren had prepared lodge members for us to bring into the fold of Islam. That is shocking news. You won't find any Muslims talking about this stuff because they get to level one fear, and maybe they go a little bit down the rabbit hole of looking into what is more in the dark, and then they tell the Muslims, you don't need to know any of this, stay away. When in actuality, we have been come here to bring light and guidance to all of the people and all of the nations. And it turns out that those who call themselves Master Masons are more primed and ready to receive the truth than most any other people. But there is some dark forces, and there are some dark agendas and dark truths in a lot of these secret societies that people haven't yet become aware of. And even though most Muslims do believe that the dark does exist, they generally just avoid it by not really addressing it. And so they tend to say, we don't really need to know anything about this. Say your surahs and pray and stay clean, and you'll be good. And that's generally true. It's only when you unfold the leaflets or peel the onion more and get deeper down into the kernel that you see the origin or the essence, right? And this is something that has been lost in Islam. We have learned the verses or learned the ahadith, and we have learned the rule, but not the purpose or intent of the law, not the spirit of the law or the root cause of the law. And so then we're left with ritualistic rules without any connection to spirit or soul. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely amazing, my brother. And it's so interesting because I had an experience like that where one of my brother Masons and my best friend, he was a past master of a lodge, and he got attracted to the message that I was spreading because I didn't see anybody talking about Islam and Masonry. So I started making videos and presentations and giving presentations in the lodges about the parallel comparisons between Islam and Masonry. And then one day he heard a lecture that I did on the charter that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to the Jews and Christians. And he said, Salman, I want to take my Shahada. And now that brother is
Wow.
in a Qadiriya school. He's a vice principal of a Qadiriya school, and he's part of the Qadiriya Tariqa. And I'm like, this is amazing on what you just mentioned about bringing these brothers to Islam. And I had the opportunity to do just that. And plus, I've I've really put in a lot of labor these last couple of years, and I've dealt with a lot of hostility, but also with a lot of support. And so many American Masons, their eyes have opened up to what Islam is, and I've eliminated many of their misconceptions that they had about the Islamic faith on how like so much of this stuff comes from Islam. And I think it's such an honor and a privilege that on this journey we come with like-minded brothers, and we are there to support each other, uplift one another. And I think that's the whole beauty of it all, whether it's the five pillars of Islam or the pillars of Masonry, strength, beauty, and wisdom, and how we must find that basically that goodness within us of good men becoming better men and helping the world around you. And right now, currently, I'm visiting the Dallas Fort Worth area, and I'm seeing that here within the Islamic community that they have a strong Islamic community here, and what Masonry teaches us. And again, I've also encountered dark Masons as well. So just like how everything has good and bad in it, even in Freemasonry, you'll have good Masons that are good members of the church, good members of the masjid or whatever religion they belong to. And also, you'll have those that are pursuing the dark arts. So even in that, you'll have the concept of duality of the light and dark. And we must be able to have discernment with Islam, with Freemasonry, and what all of these different traditions are teaching us. And I thank you so much because of the teachings that you have given us since day one. Those that have followed you know that you are teaching the truth of that light. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. We are all part of that light. And that's what Freemasonry is teaching us. What do you seek? Light. Where does Allah judge you? From your heart. Where do you first become a Mason? In your heart. You go through the rite of circumambulation, just like at the Holy Kaaba, wearing the white cloth of innocence, equivalent to the lambskin innocence of a master Mason. So it's all pretty much one and the same, Brother Saleem. And my brother, I'm so honored, which goes to my next question. How has Islam influenced other Western traditions? Like we see all of this beautiful and amazing history, which we are not being given in the history books. Growing up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and going through the school system and social studies and global studies, they never teach us these things. And even in these occult or esoteric traditions, they never tell us the role of Islam. Why is Islam so suppressed?
So this goes back now into the actual battle of the light versus dark, right? If what we're saying is true and you know the truth and I know the truth, then the dark side would be ultimately trying to make sure that the mass majority doesn't find out this truth. Now, how they've generally done that is always reverse the story, right? Make it sound like the early Templars were corrupted into being with Muslims and they were involved in paganism. The idea that we are always involved in paganism and working with the jinn. The idea that Islam is some kind of covert operation conducted by the Illuminati and the church in Europe to confuse the Arab world. They always make it seem like Islam is an other and we are not worshiping the one true God, right? No, even though we are the people of Tawheed and we are the people who teach the concepts of believing of all of the prophets and recognizing they're all sent by the same one God, even amongst Christians and Jews, they have somehow been trained to believe we're still talking about a different God and we're still not talking about the same brotherhood of prophets. So somehow that misconception has continued, and that's been done by the dark on purpose. And when when people try to seek into Islam, they'll generally teach them dark arts in the ways of disrespecting Islam, right? So this is that dual path that people are worried about. And so it's oftentimes when Muslims go into studying any of these esoteric concepts, they hear about the dark and negative agendas that people do, meaning all forms of jinn or evil manipulation is usually based on an imitation of an Islamic ritual that disrespects Allah as a act of shirk and defiance, right? To disrespect the power and glory and majesty of Allah by performing a ritual backwards in a dark way, in an impure place, in an impure clothing, in some kind of evil way. And when Muslims see this, they go, look, this is just satanic evil stuff being done by these secret societies. And that all that part is true, right? All that part is true. At various points, each individual is offered both the white stone and the black stone, and they almost are making their choice between the right and left side in every step they make. And it is possible that many people, even people in positions of power, both from Masonic lodges or churches or synagogues, or even imams in masjids, sometimes this occurs. A person pretends to be righteous and acts like he can protect you with light and this and that, and they find out he's secretly doing some kind of evil ritual with a jinn. And this goes back to the ancient knowledge of the Temple of Solomon. And the concept is there that the acts, when performed, to an outside observer could almost look identical unless you're trained to see the subtle differences. And that's why Allah says, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ, that even though Suleiman was doing things which look miraculous in his command with the authority of Allah over the jinns and shayateen, he was not committing kufr. Although there might be others who are also using supernatural powers and abilities or alien technology, and they are not righteous, but are committing acts of kufr, and the system seems the same. And this knowledge is secretly embedded with the Muslims in the story of Bilqis. When Suleiman asked for Bilqis's throne, the chair, right, for those classic conflict viewers, the chair to be brought, and the jinn, the ifrit, the most powerful of the jinn, says, I can bring it before you rise up from your chair, before you stand. Then the one who had knowledge of the book said, I can bring it instantly. Kun fayakun, be and it is so. Because he had knowledge of the book, what we say in Arabic, ilm al-kitab, knowledge of the word, knowledge of the book. Now this legend that we have in the Quran is almost the fundamental basis of the stories and myths of the Master Mason Lodge. Now, in the Master Mason Lodge, they call this student of Solomon Hiram Abiff. Whether that was actually his name or not, it represents the fact that there were apprentices of Solomon who learned the true light knowledge of understanding. Although there were many after the age of Solomon who learned the dark. And that knowledge of people using both the light and dark amongst the early children of Israel after the time of Solomon creates the racist, sometimes tropes that people fall into, and stories about, you know, the elders of Zion and all the different stuff that you hear. And there are both truths and falsehoods in all of this, right? And in that original concept is the idea that there are bloodlines who are the sons of Adam, and there are bloodlines that are hybridized, and there are bloodlines that are more blue or reptilian or holy, and all these concepts get mixed. And at different times, people hear this, and first it's shocking, first you have fear, then you do some research, then you find out it's true. But what you don't find out most of the times is that not only is it true, but it's been true for a long time, right? This same knowledge is what the Germans found out during World War II, and it made them freak out and go and try and find the Ark and find ancient artifacts and create what we would call a Holocaust, because they thought, well, we're not the reptilian hybrids, then the Jews must be the reptilian hybrids. And it caused them to do strange experiments on the human body and transplants and different things to try and see, are we the same humans? And they found out, We are the same humans, so they don't normally talk about this. And the Jews also used to say those who are non-Jews are not like us, the same sons and daughters of Adam. They are something else. And there were times in the ancient past where that was true. There was more of a separation. But time has gone, and this kind of concept of bloods mixing is not something that people say, oh, is this happening right now? Yes, it's happening right now, but it's been happening for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So much so that when people find out about it, it's shocking. But the true reality is that the human race has evolved into a universal being, meaning mixed with so many bloods. This is another part of sacred geometry, right? The 12 by 12 matrix. Well, the 12 by 12 or the 12 tribes with 12 tribes is also true with the jinns or the other races. This is the idea that the Christians have of 144 being ready to ascend. It's not 144 souls or 144,000. It's actually thousands from each of the 144 types of beings, meaning all these blood types have merged and mixed. All these blood types have merged and mixed to the point where now humanity, and this is the plan of Allah. This was always the plan of Allah. Even though all these weird things happened, good beings interacted with us, genetic experiment, human hybridization the old-fashioned way, right? All weird stories happening with jinns, happening with what they thought were fallen angels, beings from other realms. All these stories turned out to be true and turned out to have been happening for thousands and thousands of years, to the point that humanity is now becoming a universal being. And the thing that people don't understand is, when did this happen? When did humanity become a universal being? The marking point of when humanity becomes a universal being, when the sons of Adam are purely able to be themselves in this body, his name was Isa ibn Maryam. Jesus the Christ, the anointed one, is the embodiment and the symbol of the moment in our timeline when mankind can arise. When the sons and daughters of Adam can rise their human body of the flesh into the skies is the moment Jesus was born. And his act is the representation of that timeline. Whether you're a Sufi, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Mason, we all believe that Jesus is the truth and the light and the way. That is the point of him being the Messiah. He represents the point in our history that now the body can ascend. And we, unlike our Christian brothers and sisters, do not say Jesus was crucified. We do not say he was killed at all, but ascended in physicality with the body to the heavens. And Jesus would say of himself that the highest thing he could be is the Son of Man. Because being the son of Adam, being the son of man, is the greatest creation. And this is why Allah said, I'm going to make Adam, and he is going to be the greatest of creations, and the angels and the jinns should bow down to Adam. And this is a story that we all know, but we have forgotten what it means. And so we act subservient to the other beings when we are actually in command of the physical realms. And it turns out the physical realms go 7 levels high, not just this realm that we're on. Jesus and all the prophets we have physically ascended. We then have the story of the Prophet Muhammad performing a physical ascension. Yeah, my name is Saleem Siddiqui. It's part of my character, part of my destiny to believe in the physical ascension of the Prophet Muhammad. 7 levels high. Now, not many Muslims will say to you, oh, do you believe in the Isra and Mi'raj? Of course we do. Do you believe it's Sunnah, brother Salman? See, that's the thing that no one will ever say. I believe following the Prophet Muhammad in everything is a Sunnah. All right, well, he went 7 levels up with his body, subhanAllah. Does anybody say we should be following that Sunnah? No. We say that Isa alayhi salam was a man, not a god. The Christians are wrong. We say the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man, not a supernatural being, but a son of Adam. But then we act like they were supernatural and not men. We think that what they did must be supernatural. there's not a direct statement from the prophet, but there is the statement from Jesus where he was performing the miracles and he said, everything I do, you will do greater and more, right? To make them understand that I'm not doing something special. All of them were doing it by the idhn of Allah, by the permission of Allah, by the blessings of Allah. And then they knew at a spiritual level, when you're at that point, I am not the creator of these things. I am just the servant of Allah. And he chose to give me a good act, and so I acted out with my hand. He gave me a good line, so I delivered the line. He gave me a heart to express the emotion and light and iman, and so I acted with my light and iman. And even when they were performing miracles, they would say, this is not me, this is Allah. I am just his servant. I am just his messenger. I am just the hand with which he happened to deliver. And this is the beauty of enlightenment. This is the highest level. And this is the true for all spiritual beings. If we can get to that point of oneness and understanding, then we can all get to that next level, that highest level of initiation. We don't call them initiations in Islam. We usually call them fitnas, right? And we have a dark interpretation of them. We think, oh, it's a trial, but all initiations are the same thing. You have to go through the highs and lows to see. And after you're done, then you appreciate both the highs and the lows. And you don't wish to change your past because you see the beauty of the highs and lows. Even that which was sweet was good and from Allah, but also that which was sour was from Allah. And it was exactly what I needed to see the light, right? No more of a burden than I could take, but no less than was necessary to knock some sense into me. That's exactly what Allah gives you. And he gives that for every single person as much as they need, right? What do you think?
My brother, this is so important and pivotal in the disambiguation that we need in terms of the prophets and their miracles and what they expected from us. And what Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, expects from us is very true. And again, you've laid it out in a beautiful manner. And what I've been able to learn in my knowledge as well is that you must never question the creator. You must always say Alhamdulillah in all phases of your life. When we see the Masonic black and white checkerboard, you know it's going to be good times, bad times, good times, bad times. But it's all there to shape you to who you're meant to be. It's like what it says in the Quran that Allah says, we test you with good and evil, and to us you will all be returned. And there are many other spiritual schools and teachers that tell you that you come here to the creator you belong, and to him you shall return when your time is over. And we realize that we're all conduits of that one beautiful creator, myself, yourself, other beautiful brothers and sisters out here that are on this path. We're all here uplifting each other, guiding each other. And I think that's the whole beauty of it. Just take the good, take the bad, apply the lessons to your life, and always say Alhamdulillah, and always give praise to the creator. And that the type of life that I led, I recently came back from Pakistan, and I visited all of the Sufi shrines and masters while I was in Pakistan, in Islamabad, in Karachi, in different parts. And I was able to learn that same truth from them, where in Masonry, where you're taught, trust God and do not fear any danger. Walk your path. In Islam, we're taught the same. Allah is the guardian of the believers. So trust Allah and walk your path. He will bring you from darkness to light. And how we have in Surah 49, verse 10, that the believers are but one brotherhood. So make peace between your brothers. So that's the beauty of this entire path that we're on. And I thank you, my brother, so much. Which goes to my final question. Why is Islam always seen as a threat by the powers that be and the future of Islam in the U.S.? And after that, I will ask you one more thing.
Islam is seen as a threat for those in the third dimensional point of view who are still playing. They're playing checkers on a chessboard, but that's another analogy, right? They're playing on the checkerboard of life, and when you're trying to fight for pieces, then Islam is seen as a threat because we are not playing the same game that they're playing, right? I mean, we're playing, to make a Star Trek reference, we're playing three-dimensional chess when they're playing on a flat board. We're playing on another level of game. And so any of them who become aware of the truth become afraid. And they know, as lodge members, as members of the Illuminati, that they must maintain alliances with the Muslims. This has continued to play out with the royal families and the oil states. And now, for the first time in our lives, that connection that had been inseparable from the time of the Gulf War and the Second Gulf War, even after Salman Sheikh 911, right? I mean, even after that, the Saudi tie and the American tie didn't have any strain, even though they then went to war in Afghanistan, then they went to war in Iraq, but they never had a problem with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries because that political lodge tie is known amongst all high members of lodges that you must maintain alliances with the sacred sites. The sacred lodge in Mecca is our home branch. The Kaaba is our sacred lodge and sacred square on the earth. Anybody who goes up against the protectors of the two holy mosques will not succeed. All Master Masons know this at that high level. So they maintain that status. This is the first time in our lifetime where there's a little bit of division here, where now the first time the royals in the desert are starting to think we should ally more with those in the east than the west. So that fear, but balanced status quo, has always been there. They know, as a matter of fact, that there is an alliance. And this goes into the knowledge of the other beings and what they call the secret space program, right? The knowledge that there's jinns or other dark forces that we might call aliens, that became common knowledge. But also the knowledge that, oh, there might be good jinns and good beings and good humanoids. That again is a concept that most people can't think. Yes, if you tell them there's dark beings from outer space trying to abduct you and steal your water and kidnap your children and abduct people, they say, yeah, I can believe that, brother. I heard some crazy stuff. Okay, good. Well, what if there were light beings also, right? That's hard to believe. Like, so first people find the dark and then they get to believe it. And then it takes a long time for them to adjust to the point where there's light. And so that's also true. In outer space, there's light beings and there's dark beings. But yes, there were dark beings and this was going on and it has been going on for a long time. And so that fear in the West is now becoming common knowledge and awareness. And there is some knowledge amongst people that we would call the secret space program, that those who are of the light and those who are of truth from other planets, they're lodge brothers, right? Like all beings of light form temples, form lodges, form masjids, and find awareness. And in their sacred scrolls and in their sacred prophecies, they've been told of a sacred grand temple on an old ancient world called Earth. That's this world here. And they were told that there would be messengers on this planet, and this is the planet that got the messengers. So they've come to look. And there is an understanding since the time of Surat al-Jinn amongst those who believed in the Risala of the Prophet Muhammad that we will no longer interfere in the application of this world, right? We will not interfere. What they call the prime directive, the law of non-interference, exists because true messengers of Allah came to this world. And the kalam of Allah, the Quran, was revealed to this world. So those who call themselves the galactic federations and the councils of all these other spiritual beings, they do not interfere on this world waiting for us to awaken to this truth. But does that mean that they don't accept the final messenger? No, they did. They did 1,500 years ago when he arrived. This knowledge sometimes is talked about as the Treaty of Muhammad or the Accords of Muhammad in the secret space program. And so that is something that they kind of gloss over and use it as if to say this is an agreement we made with the other races. And they call it the Treaty of Muhammad because it happened at that time. And they try to make it sound in the West like it happened as a historical reference. No, it happened because of the Prophet Muhammad being part of what they would call the spiritual hierarchy, that he was the one chosen by Allah to receive the message from Jibreel. And here is something strange that the Muslims don't understand. How come there's enlightened beings in other dimensions and other places that don't know what's going on? It's because Allah, we know, descended the Quran from the highest level to the lowest level. And then Jibreel disseminated it to the Prophet. So everybody in between did not receive what we got. We got the kalam of Allah from above the samawat as-saba, above the seven heavens. So all beings of darkness and light in every dimension above us did not get the miracle that the Prophet Muhammad got and we got. That is why the jinns were shocked in Surah Al-Jinn when they found him. They couldn't believe it, that Allah is still revealing kalam, and Jibreel has brought it to a man on the earth. This is crazy. And from that point, a change happened in the heavens. A change happened in the sky. And even the dark shayateen couldn't get information from higher ups, because now the passage was blocked, because now the truth is delivered on earth. So we have advanced knowledge, in the words of Allah, even greater than our brothers and sisters, who are maybe even of the light, which is why they're coming here to see, is the prophecy of Allah and what their ancient prophets and messengers told them true about the sons and daughters of Adam. And this is the point that we're in right now, the awakening. And nothing is scarier to the dark than the awakening. Surprisingly, if you were alive during 9/11, that was the moment where the dark was saying everywhere, we're afraid that the Muslims are going to wake up. They made it seem like they were talking about sleeper cells or terrorists. You see, because that's how they interpreted it in the third dimension. They interpreted it as, we heard information from our dark sources and our evil overlords that bunches of Muslims are going to wake up in the Western world. They must be sleeper cells or secret jihadi terrorists. And so the West did all this overhaul and created the Patriot Act and shipped out every kind of Muslim. But those who are part of the awakening, the actual awakening of the soul and the spirit, know we're not talking about terrorist sleeper cells. We're talking about the awakening of the soul and the spirit. And once the masses of Muslims start awakening, every dumb Muslim knows one or two verses and knows a few hadith. He will say it to the next guy he sees, and these non-Muslims are going to be shocked at how beautiful and profound the verses of Allah and the statements of the Prophet are, because the truth that we have is so much brighter and lighter than what they have. It's just that most of the Muslims aren't awake enough to even deliver the line, brother. They can't even speak their truth wholeheartedly yet, because they've been so abused by the dark and the paranoia and the fear that they think that the dark side is controlling everything. They think that these secret organizations are controlling everything. They think that these evil Illuminati groups are controlling everything. Just like they fear that we have all these secret societies and organizations and agendas, and you as a Muslim and I as a Muslim know we don't have anything like that. We are the most disorganized people, and there's no structure or system at all. Not in my backyard or your backyard, but any Muslim's backyard. There has never been a place where Muslims were organized. It's not something that you can find on the dunya, right? But when you go to the other organizations and groups, you find out the same thing. There's not a organized pattern or system of deception. It's just rogue operators operating at their own sometimes, and sometimes masses will get swayed back and forth. But generally, most people are looking for truth and light. And the fear that they have, it's a deception. It's an illusion. It's a false wall or false fear that once you step into it, it's not there. Just like walking into a lodge on your own. And yes, there's an initial fear because it's the unknown. But once you walk in, you realize, there was nothing to be afraid of here at all. Right? And a lot of this world is like that. we're experiencing a horror movie. As conscious individuals, we can go to a movie and go, ooh, be scared. And we know that we're being entertained because we're not really in danger. The same is kind of almost true about the world. We sometimes need to be scared to pay attention to something, but we're not really in danger, and we really shouldn't be afraid of anything. And if you are afraid of something other than Allah, that technically is a form of shirk, and you should be avoiding it, right? We shouldn't be afraid of anything. And many Muslims who have knowledge or call themselves alim, when it comes to a lot of these issues, you know what I'm talking about, Brother Salman. They're afraid. They're afraid.
That is so true, my brother. That is so true. And there was a Sufi mazar that I visited in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, and it was called Mora Sharif. And in Mora Sharif, they have this sign that the true mukmin, or the true believer, or the true one who follows Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, the Lord of the heavens and the earth, he need not fear anything. And that is so important that this age that we're in, my dear brother, is that all of this stuff, as much as the enemies of Islam wanted to destroy the name of Islam in the post 9/11 world, it's kind of reversed, where I'm playing a role opening up the eyes of American Masons and lodges and online presentations. There's so many people that are coming to the truth of Islam. As much as the enemy wanted to damage Islam, it's like it took a total 360 effect, and it's actually getting more stronger. And people opened the Holy Quran and realized, how beautiful is this, when they look at Surah 2, verse 62, and to see that it tells you it doesn't matter if you're a Jew, Christian, or Muslim. We're all believers of the same brotherhood. Allah will have mercy on you. You must believe in Allah. And it's such a beautiful religion that's already telling you to be brothers, to be on the level as Masonry teaches us, to love your neighbors, to love your family, to do the follow the 5 pillars of Islam, and to live your life in a good, clean way. And it tells you that the life of this world is nothing but an amusement and a play in Surah Al-Anam. So why fear anything, right? The concept of being in this life as a test, or being in a simulation, or all that stuff. Just do what you need to do. And may Allah make all of our journeys easy in this life. And we all come together as like-minded brothers and sisters of this path. And I am truly grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the knowledge that you have given, not only to myself, but countless other lives you have changed. We don't realize how many lives we change it throughout the course of our lives, my brother. And which basically, if there's anything that I failed to ask you that you would like to address, please do so. And please tell the viewers how they can find you and support you with the hot conflict mission that you have going on. So please, anything that I failed to ask you, please address it, and how the viewers can help basically support you and learn from you, and where to find you, and things of that nature.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you as always. Again, the most important thing is to not give up, right? And to not be afraid, to not lose yourself in fear, and keep working on yourself and keep searching. Many times we think none of this stuff can be true. It seems all too crazy. There's too much weird stuff going on. But the truth is, no, all the crazy things are probably true. All the strange conspiracy you've heard, they're probably all true. You have to just be willing to dive in and dive deeper, and not be afraid. One of the things we do, like you've been saying, hotconflict.com, I put up what I used to call esoteric teachings or advanced teachings, because the reality is we are in a different time. I mean, I'm 50 years old, so I've been on this earth or on this rock for 5 decades, and there is something different happening now than previous times. We are in a spinning, a rotation, a speeding up of time, an acceleration, an awakening, an ascension. People are calling it different things. And those who are Muslims are also seeing the signs of the tribulations and trials that's coming to the earth. So it is a time where everybody is going to be pushed or prodded and poked until they either choose to not remember or wake up. And we're always trying to get people to wake up, notice the truths, pay attention, and know that, yes, we can't cover every subject in any 1 hour. Even what we covered, it's a lot of little droplets and droplets, but the true story is deep and complex and is interconnected in so many ways that if we were to debate some of these things, we would make millions and millions of other connections that we're not even addressing that all exist throughout all the histories of various groups. But the concept of oneness, the concept of oneness is always true. That all those who seek the light, and whether they describe that feeling as light or love or truth or pureness, that essence is one. That essence is something that only the Creator can give. And all those who believed in Him know that they're sharing it. And it makes us all one together. That which we call light, that which we call love, that which we call the soul is something that Allah, the creator of everything, gave as a gift to all of His creation, and all of the creation share it. Allah says, Ya ayyuhannas ittaqu rabbakum, have consciousness of your Lord who created you from nafsin wahid, from one nafs, from one consciousness. So all of us beings, and all the beings out there, and all the beings inside of the earth, and any other planets and any other realms, all conscious beings, if they have a soul or spirit, are sharing in that oneness. And once you understand that on a spiritual level, the idea of separation between you and other beings of light starts to break up. And yes, when Muslims greet each other and hug each other, we just had Eid, and I say to you, Brother Salman, Eid Mubarak, and I would hug you. We understand as Muslims that we are one and we are one soul and we embrace each other. But only when you start interacting with other races and other people and other faiths and other lodges and other temples, and do you see that oneness of others in humanity, does that barrier that sometimes being only in a Muslim environment start to break up? And then once that happens, you will start to see oneness in everyone. That isn't to say that, all of people are on the right path. That's not what I mean. But that you can see the beauty and the perfection in everything that is. And it is only when you're at that level are you truly seeing, without your nafs, without your ego, without the self getting in your way. And all of us who are human are always dealing with that. And so we ask Allah to forgive us for anything that we might have said that's incorrect. My name's Saleem Siddiqui. I'm on hotconflict.com, on YouTube, on TikTok, Instagram. Getting ready to start launching a site and put some of the advanced trainings there. And maybe we'll figure out how to do more of these interviews and do interviews with other groups and people, and maybe even do some discussions and figure out what's the next step. I got to say before we close, next time you go to Pakistan to go meet with the Sufis, you got to call me, brother. Let's go together. That sounds like too much fun. We need to learn how to get there, and then we fly back on our own magic carpet, though. Not we have to get some advanced training, right? Inshallah.
My brother, it's truly been an honor and privilege for me. And I'm only 30 years old. I'll be 31 soon. And you're like my older brother, or like equivalent of being my father. And I'm truly grateful for you, that the part that you played in my journey, Saleem Siddiqui, the son of Shamshad, the great light being and warrior who's here on earth like the rest of us to bring oneness and peace to all of humanity, the true white hat, the white hats we're all waiting for, the Galactic Federation of Light. He's right here at hotconflict.com. So in the future, we will definitely do future interviews, and you have my full permission to use this interview how you see fit. And for the people that will be watching this on my channel, I will post this on May 5th, 2023, while Brother Saleem can post it whenever he wishes. And we will definitely do future interviews and future topics. And inshallah, next time I do go to Pakistan, I think with the way things are going, I might end up coming to Texas anyway. And fate is bringing me here from Pennsylvania. Then we will definitely make a trip to go see the Sufis in Pakistan together as well. So thank you so much, Brother Saleem. And greetings and peace and love and light be unto you and yours. Until next time.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace.